Teenagers often go through crossroads where choice determines their future. But what exactly happens when those choices produce irreversible tragedy? Today, let's talk about the dashing cases of teens' reactions to life sentences, moments that capture raw human feelings, the weight of justice, and the ripple effects of unbearable choices. Number 1. Seandell Jackson, the smirk that shattered families. Seandell Jackson, at 18, had his entire life ahead of him. But one night, a misguided attempt to rob a university student, Nathan Potter, in Milwaukee turned fatal. When Jackson realized Potter had no cash, he pulled the trigger, ending a promising life and unraveling countless others. In court, Jackson's demeanor was striking. His smirk as he cursed at the victim's family reflected a chilling detachment. But when the judge pronounced life imprisonment without parole, chaos erupted.
I know that that is something that is reserved for the most serious of cases, and I believe that this case rises to that level.
His family screamed in despair, while Potter's parents remained stoic, their grief too profound for words. Jackson's accomplice, Derek Thomas, received 12 years for his role as a lookout. The court's judgment underscored a grim reality: one moment of violence reverberates far beyond the courtroom. Jackson's case highlights how one impulsive act can alter lives irreparably. Number 2. T.J. Lane, the killer with no conscience. If Jackson's smirk was unnerving, T.J. Lane's courtroom performance was nothing short of horrifying. At 18, Lane executed a school shooting in Ohio, leaving 3 dead and 3 others injured.
The teenage suspect in that high school shooting in Chardon, Ohio on Monday was charged today with 3 counts of murder. We asked Michelle Miller to find out what she could about the suspect, T.J. Lane. Michelle starts tonight with a march that the high school students held this morning.
His lack of remorse turned the trial into a theater of cruelty. Wearing a shirt emblazoned with the word Killer, Lane mocked the families of his victims, smiling as they described their unbearable loss. The judge handed Lane 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. The courtroom fell silent, not out of satisfaction, but from the chilling realization that such coldness existed in someone so young. Lane's case remains a harrowing example of senseless violence and the scars it leaves on communities. For Lane, there was no attempt to explain or seek forgiveness. Instead, his actions in court added salt to the wounds of grieving families.
The brother in the courtroom and that did this was not the brother I knew.
How does a teenager become so detached from humanity? Was it an inherent evil, or was it shaped by his environment? These unanswered questions add another layer of unease to Lane's case, serving as a grim reminder of the worst consequences of unchecked violence. Number 3. Antonio Barbeau and Nathan Papi ape a crime for pizza and weed. Antonio Barbeau and Nathan Papi, both 14, committed a crime so grotesque it defied understanding. Together, they murdered Barbeau's great-grandmother.
Confessions of a young killer. A Sheboygan County teenager takes the stand describing how he and his friend killed his great-grandmother.
Barbara Olson, with a hatchet and a hammer, driven by a desire to steal money for pizza and weed. Surveillance footage captured their casual behavior after the crime, buying snacks as though nothing had happened. In court, Barbeau struggled to apologize, his tears a stark contrast to the brutality of his actions.
Pop claims Barbeau crafted that plot, and Barbeau already reached a plea deal. Today, defense lawyers trying to poke holes in the credibility of that argument.
He received life imprisonment with parole eligibility after 36 years, while Pop's parole eligibility was set at 45 years. Their story is a sobering look at how youth, unchecked by guidance, can spiral into unimaginable darkness. Number 4. Alyssa Bustamante, a terrifying diary entry. Just 15, Alyssa Bustamante lured her 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Olton, into the woods and murdered her. And her motive? Curiosity about what killing felt like. Detectives uncovered a diary entry where Alyssa described her euphoria after the act, a revelation that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Convicted as an adult, Alyssa received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Her impassive face during sentencing told of the chilling detachment of her diary. Her case is uncomfortable to consider regarding the degree to which psychological trauma might influence violent behavior. The story of Bustamante weaves together the essence of crime and the very environment that forged her. Her tumultuous childhood, defined by neglect and abuse, forged the perfect backdrop for such a tragedy. However, as much as her situation sets the important context, it is in no way an excuse for her actions. Number 5. Nicholas Lindsay, the laugh that echoed in court. Nicholas Lindsay, at 16, shot and killed Officer David Crawford during a late-night altercation in Florida. His confession initially suggested remorse, but his courtroom behavior told a different story. During the victim's daughter's testimony, Lindsay laughed, a reaction that stunned everyone present. Sentenced to life without parole, Lindsay's case left a lingering question: could anything have steered him away from this path? The juxtaposition of his youth and the weight of his actions painted a grim picture of lost potential. Lindsay's case is haunting because it bridges two extremes: the innocence of youth and the gravity of murder. The laugh that echoed through the courtroom revealed a startling lack of empathy. These stories go beyond the headlines. They're a glimpse into the complexities of teenage crime and the intricate interplay of psychology, environment, and choice. How does a young mind reconcile the weight of ending a life? For some, like TJ Lane, there's no apparent remorse. For others, like Antonio Barbeau, the reality hits too late, leaving them to grapple with guilt behind bars. But these cases also force society to confront difficult questions. Should teenagers, whose brains are still developing, face the same sentences as adults? Studies show that the adolescent brain isn't fully matured until the mid-20s, particularly in areas governing impulse control and decision-making. Yet the severity of these crimes often demands accountability that feels proportionate to the damage caused. Behind every courtroom drama is a web of affected lives. Victims' families carry grief that time rarely dulls, while the families of offenders wrestle with guilt, shame, and loss. Seandell Jackson's mother, for instance, broke down in court, expressing disbelief that her son could commit such a crime.
When I saw it on the news, I even cried. I'm like, oh my God, I can't imagine what that mother is going through. I never had a clue that my child had anything to do with it. My son is not a monster. He is not a monster.
Her pain was palpable, a reminder that offenders' actions often shatter their own families too. Communities, too, bear the burden. Schools become sites of trauma. Neighborhoods lose their sense of safety. And the justice system's outcomes often spark debates about fairness and efficacy. Each case is a microcosm of larger societal issues, from systemic poverty to the lack of mental health resources. What if interventions had reached these teens before it was too late? Mentorship programs, mental health support, and educational opportunities can provide the guidance many of these young offenders lacked. For example, addressing trauma early through counseling or community support could potentially steer at-risk youth away from paths of violence. But prevention requires systemic change. It's about more than just programs, it's about creating environments where young people see opportunities instead of dead ends. These cases should serve as calls to action for policymakers, educators, and communities to work together to address the root causes of youth violence. That's all for today. What do you think? Comment below. I want to know your opinion about this matter. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, and also don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more of these kinds of videos. Thanks for watching.